Welcome, guys. Welcome to my lecture. Thank you. So this lecture is going to be about social media and authenticity. So firstly, I want to introduce you to the main aims and learning outcomes of this session. So in this presentation, I want to talk about the concept of authenticity in the context of social media. I will aim to answer or respond to or address this overarching question: how can we apply authenticity to social media? And I want to also elucidate some critical considerations of social media impacts and uses with this concept, with applying the concept of authenticity. Okay, so by exploring the function of social media as a tool for representation, sharing, and promotion, I will seek to explicate how social media provides and simultaneously creates a setting that influences authenticity. Okay, so and the learning outcomes for this session are: demonstrate understanding of competing definitions and debates around the following key terms: authenticity, social media, self-representation, identity, lived experience. And also, you should be able to, by the end of this session, to critically engage with social media and consider how social media can relate to philosophical concepts such as authenticity. Right, so let's start. So we should begin by defining authenticity. So here we need to come up with a workable definition that we can apply to our discussion. So I should make you aware that as a concept, authenticity is a contentious one. And by looking at the literature, we can see that there is a lot of disagreement about what constitutes the definition and that there isn't a single unified meaning. So but in this presentation, we can look at some of the key components of the concept and ways of understanding it, which can then be applied to our discussion about social media. So the concept of authenticity can be traced back to social and intellectual developments in the 17th and 18th century Europe. So with the rise of the Enlightenment, there emerged a need to redefine the position of the individual in society. And what we had was a conception of the individual as an autonomous thinking subject, where every individual was deemed capable of living an autonomous life in virtue of his or her inherent rational and critical cognitive skills. And the Enlightenment called for independence of thought and individual autonomy. Okay, and this is best captured in Kant's dictum that to escape immaturity, man must dare to think for oneself without direction from another. The idea of autonomy was also important in achieving authenticity, as it emphasizes the individual's self-legislating abilities, independence of one's deliberation from manipulation, and the capacity to decide for oneself. To some extent, authenticity and autonomy agree in supposing that one should strive to lead one's life according to one's own reasons and motives, relying on one's capacity to follow self-imposed guidelines. In both cases, it is crucial that one has the ability to put one's own behavior under reflexive scrutiny and make it independent on self-determined goals. Where autonomy and authenticity differ, however, is in their subject matter. So whereas autonomy is concerned with rational self-reflection in judgment about what ends and values to choose in life, as well as with ethical judgment in general, authenticity, on the other hand, is concerned with self-determination and self-direction in making choices about how to live our lives. So it goes beyond critical scrutiny, and someone can think autonomously, but can still act inauthentically if he or she makes choices that do not correspond to their individuality. In other words, autonomy in itself does not realize one's individuality. For example, think of someone deciding between what career path to choose. Say that they are deciding between becoming a teacher or a doctor. Now, these two options may both be equally moral and stem from the same self-legislated values for the agent. As such, either choice is equally autonomous, but in order to act authentically, our hypothetical subject must choose the option that is reflective of her own individuality and self-understanding, rather than being a choice made as a result of external forces such as societal pressures and conformity. Moving on to the next slide, we are going to talk about representations on social media, and so I want to proceed to discuss the concept in relation to social media. And what I mean by social media here, for the purpose of our discussion, is that social media are internet-based social networks that facilitate interactive content sharing between their users, such as Facebook, YouTube, or Instagram. And apart from communication, entertainment, or information purposes, social media function as a tool for self-expression, self-representation, as well as self-promotion. So here, I will pose a question to you, and that is, I'm interested to know, how do you present yourself on social media? So feel free to either, unmute yourself or post your answer in the chat. How do you present yourself on social media? You can think about different things here. So what content do you usually post to social media? At what occasion do you usually post to social media? Do you use filters or other photo editing softwares when you are posting to social media? For example, can I hear from Corina? Corina, do you post to social media at all?
Yes, Lucia, I do post to social media.
And what content do you usually post there?
It's mostly personal content.
Personal, such as pictures, or do you post status updates, or what do you mean by that?
Usually it's pictures. I don't go for status updates. Yeah.
So when you post pictures, and let's suppose that these are pictures of yourself, do you usually use any filters or any photo editors?
I don't use photo editors, but I do use filters.
Okay. At what occasion do you usually post to social media? Is there anything that comes to your mind? Like, is there any specific occasion, or is it just like when you take a picture, you just want to post it, or might it be any time you're doing something special?
I'll just go for something special, or I mostly post pictures of nice places that I visit. So
pictures of nice places that you visit. Okay, thank you. What about Tom? Do you post pictures of yourself on social media, Tom?
I don't actually post pictures of myself very much on social media. I do post on social media quite a bit, but not so much. It's a big thing I do. I think when I post, I've got to the point where I post about important things or special things, like landmarks in my life, or like specific like anniversaries of big events in my life. Just looking at, I looked at my Instagram to check what it is I talk about. I think the main thing I do is post stories, and when I post stories, I like to represent myself as pathetic a person as I can. I think it's because I'm a bit reflective about social media and this idea. I think it's a bit silly. So I generally I like to post social media that makes it very clear that on a Saturday night I am watching a Bridget Jones film and things like that.
Okay.
If that's how things unfold, like I think, yeah. So I think I represent myself in a slightly pseudo knowing way. Would be
interesting.
Which is, I wish I didn't. I wish I just posted pictures. I wish I just posted pictures. Like I wish I was normal. But yeah.
Okay. Well, that's good to know. Thank you. What about Dorota? Do you post on social media?
Not anymore. I used to when I was younger, but I think I stopped a few years ago to post anything.
What did you use
Sometimes
to
people
post?
tag me.
What did you use to post, and why did you stop posting?
Yeah. So yeah, I didn't post much ever anyway. I didn't like to share my private thoughts on the social media anyway. I didn't like to share anything apart from the pictures from the trips, same as Corina, I think. Or if I saw something interesting, or if I went to see something interesting, like play or the gig or something like that. But yeah, definitely, because I read so much about like critical stuff about social media, and I decided I don't want to give my free labor to Facebook and Mark Zuckerberg, and I don't want them to gather all this data about me. I know that they still do about so many people, so I don't think my small act of resistance makes a difference. But for me personally, it does, because now I know that according to Facebook's algorithm, I'm sort of a waste rather than a subject of value. And I'm referring here to the work by Beverly Skeggs, who was actually researching Facebook and how they invigilate their audiences and how they divide the audiences between subject of value, so middle class, very active users with a lot of networks, and they are in the one category that is then sold to the advertisers in a millisecond. And the waste, so people from lower socioeconomic backgrounds, with networks of not a high economic influences, who can't post like we do, where we go for the trips or the restaurants or whatever, because simply they don't have social economic resources to do that. And by Facebook, they are actually, what do you call it? They gather this data in a separate file, let's say, and so far it's not used. And the only reason they use it
Dorota,
is to
I will
send
have to interrupt you here. Sorry, but I will have to continue because we have limited time. But thank you. But see, you are very aware of what's happening, and that's perhaps because you are very interested in this topic yourself. So, and you are yourself critical to social media. But if I had perhaps an audience of 18 years old students who never read any critical literature on social media, or even some of them were social media influencers, I guess that the answers would have been different. But nevertheless, I mean, the reasons why I was asking you these questions is because the ways in which you self-represent yourself, amongst other things, or the ways in which you interact with social media and your habits related to posting, for example, imply varying degrees of authenticity in your actions and intentions and your behaviors in relation to social media. So let's just have a look at the self-representations on social media through the lens of authenticity then, to continue with our discussion. So in the commercial world today, social media marketers will assert that in order to be successful on social media, one has to think with an audience in mind, okay? And this is a similar case when it comes to self-representation on social media. So Goffman's theory of self-representation has been widely applied to social media context to theorize how users construct their online identity. And the theory claims that self-representation becomes the means by which a person pleases the audience by matching her performance to audience expectations and preferences. Okay, so this self-representation is neither fixed, but it's not also free-floating, but is performed and tailored for the audiences in which the individual is presenting in front of, okay? And it's the same with us. So when we are presenting ourselves, we are tempted to often perform. And the ways in which we do it is that we usually tend to create an idealized representation as we strive to elicit positive judgment by others. Okay, and social media can facilitate as well as enhance this temptation, okay, that we have. So as such, self-representation is never constructed in a vacuum, and it is highly selective. There are a number of ways in which we construct our image on social media, and I will briefly talk today about the two most obvious examples of idealized self-image or deliberate self-image construction in order to illustrate the connection between self and idealized representation and authenticity. So firstly, we can self-represent ourselves or self-idealize ourselves by altering our physical appearance for social media. Okay, so this is when we use, for example, filters, effects, photo editing, softwares, airbrushing or slimming features, etc. You know, anything that you can think of really. And here we are constructing an idealized image of our physical appearance. Secondly, we can also do this by constructing an alternative idealized narrative of our lives as our social media feeds construct such a narrative. So this means that we will be deliberately selective with the content we decide to share. For example, by only sharing memorable events in our lives, such as holidays, dining out, parties with friends, work-related successes, in order to project an image of what we perceive to be our desired selves. Okay, and all of these expressions can really be analyzed from a number of perspectives of viewing authenticity. So firstly, it is the seeing authenticity. If we look at authenticity, or if we if we think of authenticity as a reliable or accurate representation of something, which in itself is a simple and probably the most widely understood meaning of the word, so this will mostly be applicable to objects and physical appearances, okay? So this would be the first example or the first instance that I talked about when we are altering our physical appearance. But then we can also look a bit deeper, and that is where when we are looking at authenticity as the concept of ownedness, which was developed and theorized by the German philosopher Martin Heidegger. And as I said, because the former is a bit more self-explanatory, and we can clearly see how idealized representations of ourselves and of our lives are simply not true reflections of reality, I will discuss the second, the latter meaning of authenticity, so the conception of ownedness. So the original concept of Heidegger's Eigentlichkeit in German, so ownedness in English, or being owned, or even being once owned, implies the idea of owning up to and owning what one is and does. And so in other words, when we choose, we make this choice with an awareness of who we are in the world and how the act that precedes our choice changes our identity and, as a result, our relationship to the world. And this awareness includes an understanding of how our choice affects the ways in which we are perceived by others and relate to them. With social media, this process is, however, interrupted. So firstly, we can create an alternative identity, a virtual version of us that bears little resemblance to the real being in the world. Secondly, if we manage to successfully present this alternative self as the real self, social media provides us with a shortcut to alter our relationship to the world without actually acting on our choices. And so this means that we can become the ideal self without having to face obstacles which come into way of its pursuit. So with social media, we choose to give up our agency in favor of passivity as we submerge into a fantasy world where with minimal effort, we can become who we want to be. By acting this way, we deny ourselves of the understanding of our true selves, and we choose to alter the perception of others instead of altering our actions. Instead of choosing who we want to be, we submit our identity to already predefined models of being. Okay, and so if we also borrow insights from existential philosophy, for example, Barrett claims that in relation to idealized representations on social media, that the texting, the chatter, the images on social media, if considered to be the real end of human endeavors, they create and present an inauthentic face to the world and to other people. And this face of being in the world is inauthentic because it is a face of a fear in response to the basic human sense of anxiety, which accompanies all human existence. And now we can talk about a little bit about the concept of anxiety. So anxiety is a central concept in authenticity and in existential philosophy, and it is a basic emotion that is felt by humans. And the process of escaping to the fantasy world in order not to deal with anxiety is inauthentic to oneself. Okay? One moment. So let me just change the slides. Okay, so, and the link between authenticity and social media, as I also said, does not rest only on the extent to which self-representations are accurate. So while in the previous case, we thought of social media idealization as an end in itself, let's now consider the online as an underlying force which acts as both an impetus for our actions as well as an end in itself and for itself. So likes, views, comments, and share features are a testimony of our fancy for our approval and admiration. According to an article in Social Cognitive and Affective Neuroscience, getting likes on Facebook or Twitter or any social media for that matter causes, and I quote, activation in brain circuitry implicated in reward, including the striatum and ventral tegmental area, regions also implicated in the experience of receiving likes from others. This means basically that we are practically hardwired to receive this kind of gratification and will keep wanting to experience this feeling over and over again. And once we discover the pattern that unlocks this potential of social media for us, social media gains the power to alter our offline actions and induce real life behaviors. What drives us here is the intention to either strive to embody ideals promoted by social media or to advance them. Ultimately, social media here acts as a source for desires and ideals which are external to oneself. So we can apply the example of social media influencers here. So social media and Instagram in particular has become very heavily reliant or heavily marketized. Okay, so it has become a marketplace like any other. So the focus of Instagram has shifted from being a more artistic platform and more creative platform for independent photographers or artists to a very heavily commercially oriented platform for celebrities and advertisers. Commercial activity has become the primary purpose for the majority of Instagram's content, which also allowed for the creation of a new full-time occupation, and namely the social media influencer, Instagram influencer. A group of researchers actually studied how product endorsements and promotion as an externally motivated behaviors can impact the perceived authenticity of social media influencers from the external perspective, and also looked at the extent to which social media influencers can negotiate their authenticity through making choices related to product endorsements. What they found was that in order to maximize authenticity, which they also linked with subjective well-being, social media influencers must refuse certain non-spontaneous commercial opportunities, which present some of the most salient forms of external drivers on the scale of motivation for their content. They concluded also that influencers who are not passionate about the products they promote, or they aren't transparent and honest about them in front of their audience, may fail in the long run because such an overly commercial orientation may not only lack resonance with their followers, but can also result in a decreased subjective well-being, which is directly linked to authenticity in this case. We can talk about here. We can talk about the YouTuber Michelle Fan, for example, who explained in a video why I left, which has over 12 million views or so for now. She said that she stopped being an influencer because of authenticity management issues. She said that who she was on camera and who she was in real life were two totally opposing personas, and it started to feel like strangers. And stories of influencers who quit social media are actually not an uncommon occurrence, and many of them claim that after merging their life into social media, they experienced increased anxiety, low self-esteem, and decreased enjoyment of real life experiences. Now, with the quality disposition construct based on the theory of quality applied to the relationship between the perceived authenticity and technology use, Peirce introduced in his theory of quality 3 levels of quality. Sorry, I meant with this model, we can better understand why this happens. Okay, so we have 3 levels of living according to Peirce in his theory of quality. So we have the firstness, which is the self-experience. Secondly is the one of relationships, and thirdness is the symbolic representation. Okay, so these are the 3 modes in which we can live, and basically in which we can perceive our lived experiences, or in which we can kind of also look at the quality of our experience. It has been argued that media is at the level of symbolic representation. It is not the true experience. And if a large proportion of one's daily life is spent in languages or in broadcasting text and images, then one is reducing the percentage of truly living in life experiences. And when one is living life through a screen, there is an opportunity cost, of course. So the cost is not being present when experiencing the moments that make life authentic. So one can choose to focus on engaging at different levels of living, okay? So firstly, it would be living in and mindfully experiencing the worldly life. So that would be the self-experience, the first level of it. Secondly, we can choose to live with frequent interruptions from media snapshots. So while the first one is I'm eating my dinner and I'm enjoying my food while being fully present in the moment, the second one would be I take pictures whenever my meal looks nice and I want to post it immediately. Thirdly, the third level of this experience would be living in an entirely virtual world, and this would be me, for example, playing video games of cooking with often empty stomach or eating junk food. Okay, and if one's physical body is immortal, then we can have all of these experiences, but it is not. So we really have to choose how we want to engage, okay, with what level of living and for how long. And the question is, which level of living do we choose to focus on? And wouldn't it be the first one that we would consider as the most desirable or the most essential for our well-being? But lastly, let's turn to a question. Can actually social media be authentic, or is it all that bad as I just kind of described? Is it all inauthentic? Is it all fake? Does it all make us feel depressed? Are there possibilities of realizing our authentic self, if we can actually conceive of such thing, on social media? And is it possible with social media? So it has been argued that social media can be human action in the form of text and images, which can be a way of being authentic in this world if the contextual possibilities are realized. So social media can be, for example, may serve as a space for freedom of expression. Okay, so maybe this is the true attraction of social media, where one can choose spontaneously not to be in any traditional social roles anymore that are typically confined in social situations with social norms. Okay, so it is also a fact that people cannot exist in isolation from society. And for example, Rousseau argued that social life requires identification with social. Okay, I can't anymore. So I'm just gonna stop the recording now.
But it was great. It was